This week, I want to address one of the most prevalent questions that I get in my DMs, people messaging me in my comments asking, why do you solo travel? Because there's this perception that it's really dangerous, that it's difficult, that it gets lonely. It's a crazy thing to do. And yes, it definitely has its challenges. I mean, when you solo travel, you have to figure out everything by yourself. You do sometimes have to navigate this whiplash between social exhaustion and loneliness. You do have to make all the decisions. You do all the planning by yourself. If something goes wrong and you're in a place where you haven't made a few friends yet, you have to figure that out by yourself. You have to take yourself to the doctor. You're completely responsible for yourself. You're thousands and thousands of miles away from people who really care about you and who know you. And that is scary, but it's also really liberating. So today, I want to make a case for solo travel and why I believe that every single person in their life has to do this at some point, whether it be a weekend or longer if you can. Let's talk about why solo traveling is the most liberating, empowering thing you can do for yourself. Welcome back to Lost and Found, the podcast where we're figuring things out in real time together. I'm your host, Carmen Vit. Let's get straight into number one. So why solo travel? Firstly, it will absolutely make you realize that the blueprint doesn't exist. The blueprint for life, this idea we have of what life is supposed to look like, we think that it's the set journey. We realize that it's just a human construction. I mean, the first time I solo traveled, I landed in a place that didn't look or feel anything like the world I'd known. I wasn't just exploring this new landscape. It was like I was unlearning something that I once thought was completely solid and unbreakable. And then you come to a different place and you realize that, oh wow, people here don't do it in this way at all. And so maybe what I've grown up to believe is the norm is just a construction of my culture, right? Because back home, we're all handed a blueprint early. We're told to study hard, get a degree, find a respectable job, and then settle down. Then you must buy property, have kids, rinse, repeat. It's the kind of path that's presented to us like maybe it's a prize. It's neat, it's linear, it's safe. But then you cross a few borders, and that illusion starts to crack. You start to see that what one country considers as successful, another country barely values. And what feels sacred in one culture can seem absolutely absurd in another. I was in India and I was invited into this family's home and they cooked for me. I met them that day and we ended up eating dinner in the main bedroom, the bedroom of the mother and the father. And we were all sitting on their bed, our plates straight on the bed and eating with our hands. And I thought that was so beautiful, but back at home, that would be unheard of. I think in most Western cultures, it would be unheard of. And then there are places where people don't own cars, or they live communally, or they never marry, or maybe they pray 5 times a day, or they don't pray at all. When you start traveling, you realize that none of these things are better or worse. It's just different. And that difference opens something in you, because that's when you start to see how arbitrary many of your norms are, and how much they're shaped by where you were born, who raised you, what you were taught. And yes, at first it's really unsettling. It's like losing your footing, but it's also wildly liberating. Because if it's all made up anyway, then you get to make it up too. You get to ask, what kind of life actually feels good to me? So I think, yes, solo travel breaks the blueprint, but it also gives you permission to build something from scratch. Because you start gathering pieces from everywhere. Maybe you love the slowness of Spain, or the generosity of India, or the boldness in Brazil. And then you start stitching your life together from all these things that actually resonate with your soul, not just things and ideas that you've inherited. Nitpicking and having new experiences and broadening your horizons, and then realizing that what you grew up with, what you're used to, isn't necessarily the norm. And that gives you the freedom to build a life that actually feels authentic to you and that you're really excited to live. Okay, the second big reason why I think everybody should go on a solo trip at least once in their life is that you learn to live for yourself. And it's not selfish. We're going to get into that in a second. But firstly, I want to mention that realizing the blueprint doesn't exist is one thing, but choosing to walk away from that blueprint and then deciding what you want instead is a whole other process. And that's where the real work begins. It's easy to say, screw the rules, screw the blueprint. It's harder to know what to do with all that space once it's gone. And I think it's almost as if solo travel hands you that blank space. Because when you're on a trip like that, you don't have any distractions, no obligations, no one to orbit around. Just you, and you're in charge of your own time, your own choices, your energy. Yes, that might sound luxurious, but it's also confronting as hell. Because most of us have spent so long calibrating ourselves to what others want. What our partners want, or our parents, or our bosses, or maybe our friend groups, that we forget what we actually enjoy as an individual and who we are when no one is watching. And that's the gift that solo travel gives you. It gives you that space and freedom to experiment and to remember what you like, who you are. It starts with those tiny daily decisions when you're on your trip, like, where should I eat today? When will I wake up? What street do I want to wander down? Do I want to take this walk and then, maybe I want to stop and chat to the street vendor, and that turns into a 2-hour conversation and nobody's rushing me. I think the times that I'm the most grateful for the fact that I'm solo traveling is when I'm at the airport, because I love a last-minute coffee before boarding. Like, literally everyone's already queuing up to board. They're starting to scan the passports. And I go get myself a little Americano, and I go to the bathroom, and I'm always like the last person to board. Whenever I travel with anybody, they freak out, and then we just spend the rest of the plane ride where this person is mad at me. And I know I'm not going to be late. Like, I've timed it to perfection. So it's in moments like that where I'm so grateful for the fact that I'm solo traveling, because I can get away with stuff like that. And if it does go wrong, then I know it's only my own fault. But it's in those little moments where you make the decisions. You're completely in control. You realize you don't have to be the fun one, or the smart one, or the caretaker, or whatever role you've been carrying for years in a group dynamic or whatever. You can just be you. You can just be. And from that place, you then get to rebuild. Not for applause, but for peace. And that kind of agency is subtle, but it's life-changing. It's the confidence that comes from knowing that you don't need to justify your choices, that your desires don't need to be productive or palatable to anybody else. Living for yourself, and now here's the point I want to make very clearly. Living for yourself doesn't mean shutting people out. It means letting them in after you've figured out who you are when no one else is steering, when no one else is watching. So, solo travel kind of invites you to become your own reference point, not in a selfish, closed-off way, but in a grounded, intentional, and deeply connected way. And once you've tasted that, you will never again be content with living a life that isn't yours. Never. Okay, number 3, you become fully self-reliant. So when you're solo traveling, like I said, it doesn't let you off the hook. There's no one else to make the phone call for you, or book the bus, or carry your bag, or translate the menu, or figure out where the hell the platform is and why it just changed again for the 3rd time. It's all on you. And the first time that hits, it's a little jarring. But then it starts to feel kind of electric, because you begin to realize that you don't need someone else to figure out things for you. You can land in a new city with 0 context, and you can still manage to find your SIM card and a place to sleep and the nearest falafel stand before sunset. You find your way around the mess, around the noise and the not knowing. And you realize that, oh wow, I'm adapting. I'm not panicking. You ask strangers, you get it wrong, you laugh at yourself. And then you learn to trust your own gut, and you learn to trust your own way of, I want to say, moving through the world. And that's a beautiful thing. I think that one thing that my 2 years of solo traveling has taught me is that I will be okay in 99.9% of situations with a smile and just a few hand gestures. And yeah, I know sometimes you cry in a public bathroom because you're exhausted and nothing makes sense, and your hostel key stopped working, or maybe the Wi-Fi's down, and you just want to call your mom or your phone died. But that's a part of it too. But even then, and I think especially then, you realize that you've got yourself. That even on your worst day, in the middle of a language barrier and heat stroke and a spiral, you will figure it out because you always do. And that's what self-reliance actually looks like. And that's what true self-confidence is built off of. And self-reliance, I think, gets a bad rep sometimes. People think it means being emotionless or cold and not letting others in. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's more about knowing that when push comes to shove, you've got your own back. That you're allowed to ask for help because you know you can also stand alone. And that translates into this knowing that I'm also allowed to ask for help because I know I can stand alone in this and figure it out by myself. But when help is there, I can ask for it. That is part of figuring it out. So you stop outsourcing your safety or your comfort or your direction, and you become the one steering the ship, even when the map is blurry and the waves are high. And that changes everything in your life going forward. That gives you a kind of calm, cool, collected confidence in yourself that will be magnetic for the rest of your life. And you will attract people and opportunities to you because people are attracted to someone who just has the energy of, I got me. Okay, number 4, you learn how to feel more deeply. There's something about being alone in a new place that really cracks you open. And maybe it's the quiet. Maybe it's the absence of distraction or the fact that you're not performing for anyone because there's no one to impress and no version of you to maintain. Whatever the reason is, I think that when you're solo traveling, things just hit differently. It's as if the food tastes better and the moments feel sharper. Almost like the volume on life gets turned up all the way. And this is, for instance, when I find myself crying on random park benches, not because anything is wrong, but because the jacarandas are blooming. And I find myself in a moment where I just feel so lucky to be there. Or you catch yourself just laughing from your belly with strangers that you met 3 hours ago. And you realize this life is beautiful. There's so many incredible people to meet. So I think the highs are higher, and yes, the lows are lower, but even the loneliness feels honest. It's like you're finally letting yourself feel all the things you've been too busy or too scared to feel back at home. Traveling solo turns you into a bit of a raw nerve because you're exposed and you feel sensitive and you feel open. And that can be really confronting because you don't have your usual buffers. There's no best friend to vent to when you're homesick. No partner to hold your hand when the train is late and you're cold and hungry. You just have to sit with it. And in that sitting with it, something shifts and you realize that your emotions aren't something to be managed or hidden or fixed. They're proof that you are alive and that you are here in this moment, feeling it all. That's the gift. You become more emotionally fluent, more empathetic, more in tune, and you start to notice when something moves you, even if you don't understand why. And then you stop apologizing for it, because once you've felt the full depth of this life and the mess and the beauty of it, you will never again be satisfied with half feeling. You will want the whole damn thing. And that is a beautiful way to live. Following from that, number 5, you master the art of connection. So, like I said, there's this myth that solo traveling is really lonely. So that maybe without a partner or without friends or a safety net of some kind, there's this idea that you'll be wandering the world solo in every sense of the word. But that is not true. The thing that people don't realize is that when you travel alone, you're actually way more open to connection because you are not insulated by comfort. So you're not sticking to a friend group or a partner who you're traveling with. You are looking up. You are ready and open for connection. So you strike up conversations. You say yes more. Like when you're in a hostel courtyard and you're sitting by yourself, maybe you're eating your lunch and somebody else is sitting by themselves, you will notice how naturally a conversation starts. A friendship forms, and next thing you know, you're going out to dinner together. Next to you, two other solo travelers met up and they're having dinner together, and you four start chatting. And stuff just happens and connections flow, and it's so spontaneous you don't even realize. On my first plane ride to my first solo trip, I was so scared that I wouldn't make friends. And I completely forgot about that fear the moment I landed. I was in the immigration queue. At that point, I was entering the UK. I was standing in the immigration line, and there was a guy behind me. And he was also solo traveling, and we just started chatting. And next thing you know, friendship is formed. And it happens just like that. Because when you're alone, you are open for connection. It is wild how fast and deep some of these friendships go. I mean, you spend 3 days with someone and feel like you've known them forever. And then you share secrets that you haven't told anyone back at home. And I'm going to warn you, you'll fall a little bit in love with everyone. Maybe not in a romantic way, but definitely in a way where you feel really seen by them and you feel like you see them. Because when you are traveling and you meet other travelers, there's a certain barrier that isn't there because you know that you'll probably never see this person again. So the connection goes way deeper, way faster. You meet somebody in the hostel, and if you get along well, you probably spend 5 days straight in their company, and you get to know each other super well. It goes from where are you from, where are you going, how long are you here, to what is your biggest fear and your most heartbreaking breakup story. And then it's really hard because you have to say goodbye to those people and you do it all over again. You'll be amazed at how many versions of love the world holds once you start paying attention and how incredible people are. The best part out of all of this is that you realize that you don't have to be anyone but yourself to be loved. You don't have to be funny or pretty or smart or easy or whatever you think. You can just be you. And still you will be met with kindness. You will be invited to the table. Solo traveling teaches you that the world is full of people who are waiting to meet you if only you are brave enough to be met. Okay, number 6, this is probably the most important one, and it's woven into everything we've talked about so far, but I do think it 100% deserves its own section. So this is the fact that you deepen your relationship with yourself. There's a kind of silence that only exists when you are truly alone. Not lonely, alone. When there's no one expecting you to be funny or productive or to be okay and put on a brave face. And it's in that silence that you start to hear yourself again. Not the version of you that performs, not the one shaped by other people's expectations, but just you. And maybe at first it feels a little awkward. Maybe it feels like you're on a first date with someone you knew long ago, but you sort of forgot existed. Because you take yourself out to dinner and you're like, oh, what do I like? What kind of morning do I enjoy when no one is here? What calms me down? What lights me up? What do I need to do when I don't feel that good? When I maybe feel lonely or a little bit anxious? How do I take care of myself? And solo travel forces those questions to the surface. Not necessarily because you're trying to be deep, but because you have to choose every single day how to be with yourself. And that's when you start to notice your patterns and the way maybe you rush through things, or the way you soothe yourself, or you start to see where you are hard on yourself or where you self-abandon. But you also notice your strong suits, how you rise, how you show up for yourself and you keep going, and how you care. And then eventually that awkwardness with yourself softens into a beautiful intimacy, and you start enjoying your own company. And something that I started doing after about 5 months into my big 2-year solo travel experience, I literally shamelessly started laughing at my own jokes. I would go for long walks and I would chat to myself, sometimes out loud if people aren't too close to me or in my head. And I think I'm hilarious, so I would just burst out laughing at my own jokes and people would think I'm absolutely crazy. But it really is like that. It's like you become your own best friend because you spend most of your time with yourself without the distraction of what other people want. You start going to dinner alone and you don't feel sorry for yourself, but you feel proud. And you build this beautiful, strange friendship with yourself, one rooted in truth and not performance. And then once you've tasted that kind of self-relationship, every other relationship has to rise to meet it. And that's how powerful it is. That's how it translates into the rest of your life. Because then forevermore, you will never, ever accept anything that's not to the standard of your own relationship with yourself. Because when you know how to be alone, really alone, and you know how to still feel full in that solitude, you stop settling for people or places that make you feel half of yourself. Because you know you can give that kind of happiness and peace to yourself, so you're not settling for anything less. That's powerful. Okay, number 7. You gain perspective. There's something about being far from everything familiar, I think, that really rearranges you. Because you stop sweating the small stuff. Mostly because you, literally don't have capacity to do it. I mean, that email can wait. And that guy that ghosted you 2 stops ago, it stops mattering. Because somewhere between your third night bus and your second bowl of street noodles, you realize that it's really not that important. And it's as if these anxieties that used to eat you alive back at home, it just shrinks when you're under wider, bigger skies. And perspective comes not just from seeing how other people live, though yes, of course, that's a part of it. I think it also comes from realizing how much energy you used to waste on things that never really mattered. Because when you start traveling, you zoom out and you realize how fleeting most things are. That the version of you who was heartbroken 2 cities ago feels like a stranger now. And that the failure that you were spiraling over last month back at home doesn't even cross your mind in this new place. So the powerful thing about solo travel is that it pulls you out of this loop. It gets you off of the hamster wheel of obsession and comparison and overthinking. Because when you're busy figuring out how to cross a border or catch the last ferry, your brain makes space for what actually matters. Your health, your safety, the stranger who handed you water when you looked like you were going to faint, and your priorities sharpen, your bullshit tolerance drops. And that doesn't go away when you go home. That's, again, the powerful thing that you carry with you for the rest of your life. This new emotional metric system, the ability to pause and ask, is this actually a big deal? Is it worth freaking out about? And that's the kind of perspective that changes how you show up in every part of your life. Okay, number 8, I'm still working on this one, but it's getting there. And that is that you learn how to budget. Because nothing makes you more aware of your spending habits than watching your car decline in a foreign grocery store with only a bruised banana and a can of chickpeas in your hand. Ask me how I know. Anyway, budgeting while traveling solo is not as much about spreadsheets necessarily, but it's definitely about consequences. You learn fast because you're in survival mode. Your ability to afford a bed for a night literally depends on you and your budgeting. So back at home, I think it's sometimes easy to be casual with money because you've got your routine incomes, maybe you have a support system or a safety net. But on the road, Every coffee, every Uber, every overpriced tourist trap meal adds up. And the trade-off is usually something that really matters, like an amazing experience, a sunset boat ride or a cooking class or an extra night in the city that you absolutely fell in love with. So you start thinking in choices instead of habits, and you become more intentional, and you learn how to prioritize, how to get creative. And you also very quickly learn more about your spending habits. Like, for instance, I always overspend in the first couple of days that I'm in a new place because I want to do a bunch of tours, I want to do experiences, cooking classes, watch shows, buy a new outfit maybe. I'm still kind of figuring out where the locals eat, where the cheaper restaurants are that still have good quality food. So that's something I learned about myself. Something that I definitely spend the most money on while I'm traveling is coffee, which is a problem, but I'm working on it. Sometimes, stuff is also worth it because you are by yourself. You are doing a lot of emotional heavy lifting and staying strong. So yeah, sometimes go for the $7 almond milk cappuccino. And then other times, maybe not. But weirdly, this whole budgeting thing becomes a fun sort of game because you start tracking expenses with curiosity, not shame. You look for ways to trade money for memory, not just stuff. And then when you finally do splurge, you go for the fancier hostel or the nicer bottle of wine or the flight upgrade. It feels earned and chosen. You're not just spending, that's when you think about it as investing in yourself and in your experience and in your story. So it's a very unique crash course in budgeting that I think solo travel gives you. Number 9, another huge one that we've kind of already touched upon, but deserves its own section, and that is that you build unshakable confidence. Something that I've learned is that confidence isn't built in mirrors or compliments or curated Instagram posts. It is built in the moment you land in a foreign country and you're sleep deprived and you're kind of panicking and you have no idea where to go, but you still figure it out. It's built in the markets where you barter badly, but you try anyway, and on the buses where no one speaks your language, but you have to rely on your gut. And it's in the moments where everything goes wrong and you still manage to laugh and keep going and figure it out. The kind of confidence that solo travel gives you is different. It is not loud. It's definitely not ego. It's the quiet kind of confidence. The kind that, becomes a part of you and starts living in your bones. The kind that says, I can handle this, even when I've got no plan or no signal. You realize that you don't need all the answers. You just need to trust that you will figure it out as you go. And guess what? You do. And that's when the shift happens. You stop needing everything to be certain before you move. And you stop waiting for the perfect timing or the perfect plans or circumstances. And you just start. And you build this kind of internal safety. Not because things get easier, but because you know that you get stronger. And you have more confidence in your own abilities. And again, that confidence follows you home. That version of you that figured out all of these things, that chased down embassy appointments and made friends of all different cultures and ages and languages, that part doesn't disappear when the trip ends. That version of you, that confidence, follows you into future job interviews or when you go on dates or when you have to set boundaries in your life. That's the gift you give yourself long term. When you decide that you are allowed to want more, that version of you that has that confidence, that knows that you deserve the world and you can give it to yourself, that version of you is permanent and they are unstoppable. Number 10, super important, you sharpen your intuition. If you are alone in a foreign country, you listen differently to the world around you, yes, but also to yourself and your own internal voice, because there's no one to defer to. Remember, you can't double check the route with a friend or kind of sense check your unease with a partner or a parent. Your only option is your gut and your body and that little voice in your head that says, leave the bar now, or talk to this person, or trust this or don't trust that. And yes, it might feel clumsy at first. You might second guess yourself. And I've often been in situations where I worry that maybe I'm being paranoid or I'm being dramatic. And you kind of weigh your logic against your instinct. But over time, it gets stronger and your intuition gets louder. And it stops sounding like fear and it starts sounding like direction. Because you learn the difference between real danger and just discomfort, between stretching your limits and ignoring your needs. And once you really learn that, it's hard to go back to silencing yourself for the sake of being polite or easy or agreeable. So solo travel is this training ground where you start to notice subtle signs, like the shift in energy when you enter a space, or just the vibe of someone. I think nobody can sense check someone's vibe as quickly as people who long-term travel, because you're meeting so many different people from all over the world, and you have to kind of instinctively decide whether you're going to be friends with this person or not even bother to make a connection. That intuition starts living in your body. It's the product of being present with yourself over and over again, enough times that you begin to believe what you feel. And once you learn to trust that intuition while you're out there in the world, it becomes impossible to ignore it when you're back home too. And then finally, you get addicted to possibility. Because once you've woken up in a city whose name you can't pronounce, or you've made friends in a hostel kitchen at 2 a.m., or you've changed your itinerary because someone mentioned a waterfall that you just have to see, something inside of you shifts, and the world starts to feel less fixed and less predictable, and a whole lot more alive. And then you realize that you can just go. You can choose at any moment. You can pivot, you can reinvent yourself, you can begin again. And it's not just the travel moments, it's also the energy of being open. It's that electricity of not knowing what's next, but you lean in anyway. And it becomes intoxicating. This possibility becomes a high because you realize how much beauty you miss when you're too focused on controlling everything. And when you release the need to have it all figured out, that's when life starts to show up for you in surprising ways. And those surprises are usually always better than the plan, in my experience. How does that translate into your life? You learn that a lot of the things that you thought were final, like your career or your relationship or a certain version of yourself, you realize that all these things are just drafts and you're allowed to rewrite. Nothing is wasted if you're still growing. A detour can be the thing that changes everything. Because the more risks you take, the more doors appear, and the more you say yes, the more the world says yes back. And yeah, not everything works out. Sometimes the detour sucks. Sometimes the night bus smells like feet and regret, but that's not the point. The point is you tried. You followed the pulse of your own curiosity, and you stopped waiting for permission and started trusting the yes inside of you. And once you've tasted that kind of freedom, that kind of wild, full body, holy shit, I'm alive kind of freedom, you will never again be satisfied with a life that feels small. And that's the gift you give yourself. So those are my main arguments for solo traveling. I really hope I convinced you to book that trip, to give yourself that gift. I want to leave you with a few journal prompts. So after listening to this episode, go think about this, take a walk, record something on your phone while you answer these questions or write it in your journal. So the questions are, whose blueprint have you been following? So write about the life path you were told, explicitly or implicitly, that you should follow. And figure out whose voice is that. Is it your parents, your culture, old teachers, or some version of yourself? The second question, when do you feel most like you? So think of a moment when you felt fully and authentically like yourself. You weren't performing or trying to please anybody, you were just you. So what were you doing in that moment? Who were you with, if anyone? Number 3, what's something you've always wanted to do, but you haven't, and why? Is it starting a creative project, moving cities, or taking that solo trip? Name the dream, and then I want you to name the fear. So write about what your life might look like if you did it anyway. Thank you for listening. And as always, if this sparked something in you, if it made you excited, made you start to dream about something that you thought maybe wasn't possible for you. Please leave a rating, leave a review. Tell me where you want your first solo trip to be. Or if you have a question, send me a DM, email me. You can find my email on my website, carmenvid.com. I would love to hear from you. Until next time.